That Long Code's YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be looking at joins in the SQL procedure in the SAS programming language. So we're going to go over inner joins, left joins, right joins, and full joins. And then we'll also look at the coalesce function and how you might use it in a full join. So before we get started, let's go ahead and look up how we're going to be accessing SAS. We're going to be using SAS on demand for academics. And so I'll jump now to the Chrome browser and look at how anyone can access this tool. And for SAS on demand for academics. Oh yeah, so this is the way I'm going to be using SAS Studio. I'm going to use SAS on demand for academics, which is a no-cost online delivery method for learning about SAS. And click on Access Now. And then you'll need to sign in. You either need to sign up for a login, which is free, or you can sign in if you already have one. I'm going to sign in. And accept the terms of the license, which you can read up by clicking on it. And there's lots of options in here, but we're going to be doing code with SAS Studio, so I'm going to launch SAS Studio. And so here's a recent tutorial, but I'm going to start a new SAS program, which you can do by going here. And I'm going to call this one SAS-joins. Okay. And I should probably put this in a file location. Cool. I'll put it in here. Okay. So that's how you go about saving a program. I got one I did for another tutorial on a test. Cool. So now let's talk about, we'll start moving into the first type of join we're going to talk about. Join in here, you can see in the Venn diagram, we're looking at an inner join. Here we have set A and set B, and we're taking the part where they both meet. So this is how you could visualize an inner join in a Venn diagram. So let's jump back into SAS Studio and look at two examples in SAS. Actually looking at the inner joins, I do just want to mention something about the contents procedure. It's a very useful procedure in SAS that you're likely familiar with if you're watching this video, but if you're not, here's a great opportunity to just take a one or 2 minute detour and take a look at what you can get out of the contents procedure. So for example, if we wanted to look at some of these SAS help library data sets that we're going to look at to get more information, which might help if you're reproducing what I'm doing. For instance, if one data set we're going to be using is SAS help.gc state. And if we want some information on the the different variable names, column names, the formats or something when you're doing a join, which is useful. So you're making sure you're getting the same data type as with the other data set you're merging with or you're doing a join with. So yeah, I think we'll probably look at map ID name, which is the state province name, and it's a character with a length of 65. So that's useful information. If you're going to join if there's any kind of sort, which you wouldn't expect in such a data set, because it's a read-only one for examples, for used for creating examples. So we're not going to expect that, but that information would be down here. If there was an index on the data set, that would also be down here. But anyway, just a caveat, something that's useful if you're unsure about the characteristics of the data set you're using for joins. Okay, so let's get started with an inner join here. Yeah, let's jump right in with PROC SQL. I tend to use a no print option. It's not really necessary with these examples, but I just generally use it. Another one I often use is a feedback statement, which feedback option that you can just throw in there. Gives you a lot more information in the log than you get without it. Let's put it that way. So it's just useful, especially if you're doing a query for the first time or you're testing something. So I'm going to call I'm going to create a table. Yeah. So I'm going to create a table. I'm going to save this to my work library essentially. It'll show up down here. And it's I tested it already. It's going to be join 1. So it will live as long as my SAS session is going. I don't necessarily need this. I could just jump straight to the select statement and we'd see my table in the results. If I turn off no print, but I'm going to save it as a SAS data set. So I'm selecting everything from my table reference A. So that's what I mean here by using the star. I'm selecting everything from table A. I'm going to select one particular column here from what I'm going to call table B. And I could give it whatever name I want. It doesn't have to be A and B. I just think that's a easy way to follow what I'm doing. It could be a more meaningful name. But for now, we'll just stick with that. So from SAS help .prdsal2. Again, SAS help library. You can check it out or use the PROC contents to learn more about that data set. Yeah, and then it's got the table reference A, so its alias here. And then B is going to be a different data set, the one we're doing the inner join with, and it's going to be US data, and then here's the B. Oh, and it's trying to make me type between, but now I'm going to use the where statement, which is like the on statement for this way of doing an inner join. So where I have to have a column here or a variable, we often say in SAS, in common between the two. And it's state name for table B and state for table A. And then I have to put the quit statement always to stop the to finish the PROC SQL. And you could have multiple tables in between here. You can just keep on going until you're done with what you want to run and then put a quit statement. So cool. I'm going to run that and then we'll take a look at it. This work library data set. So, I must have a syntax error. Let's clean that up. Code. Put an extra B in there for some reason. There we go. All right. Okay. Yeah, good to see me work through my typos. So I'll leave that in the video. I won't edit that out, just so you see, how you can troubleshoot things with the logs. Very easy in SAS Studio. You go in the log. Now I have no errors, but earlier you could see I had an error and I clicked it. Anyway, yeah. So we took every column in our table A, which was PRDSAL2. And we matched it up with just this one column from table B here, which was density 2010. Okay, yeah, no, so just remember that the inner join returns essentially only the rows that have matching values in both tables. And so, essentially where we had the two state and state name are equal to one another, we get the value for density 2010 is actually the population density for a particular state. So you'll notice it's the same for all of these ones that are California. If you went to the state of Washington, it's a different number. So that's a simple way to do an inner join. And there's another way to do it with slightly different syntax, but it's probably more common to other flavors of SQL. Yeah, for sure it is. So everything's the same to here. If you want the same columns, I'll call it a different name so we can look at it. From SAS help PRD cell 2. And now I'm just going to type inner join SAS help.us data and the table reference B. And instead of where, I'm going to do an on statement. And again, because we're in SAS Studio, it explains exactly what the on SQL expression keyword is. And so you look at that and you should get exactly the same result. Cool, yeah, we could do a PROC compare to compare. They're exactly the same, but we know they've got the same number of rows and columns. So yeah, just two different ways. Perhaps this is a more common SQL way to do it. Yeah, so now let's go on and move on to looking at an example of a left join. So now we'll be looking at the left join in SAS. Here again, you can see the Venn diagram visualization of that. We're going to be excluding everything from the right side. So just to remember that a left join essentially returns all the rows that are on the left table and the matching rows from the right table. And then obviously a right table, right join, which we're also going to get to, would be returning all the rows from the right table and the matching or corresponding rows from the left table. So let's look at an example of that in SAS. So I'm going to do a left join with the GC state data we looked at. So let me just type left join example. And cool. Comment that out. And yeah, so I'm going to do a left join between this US data set again and the GC state data set we looked at in the contents procedure at the beginning of this, just before we did the inner join. So, PROC SQL, you can do with or without the no print, it doesn't really matter. I tend to almost always do the no print. Create table. I'm going to call it left join. Actually, I'll call it join free as select. And here's where I'm going to select what I want. I'm just going to do star. I'm going to take everything from table A and everything from table B. And I need the from statement. So from SAS help dot GC state. And I need that table reference A. Again, it doesn't have to be A. It can be whatever you want to call it, as long as it's consistent here and here. A left join SAS help dot US data, and that table reference is going to be B. It just has to, this and this just have to match. So you can call them something else if you want, a more meaningful name or a particular name. Okay, I didn't want to do that. Okay, so now let's do on. So we need our on. And something they have in column, a column variable name that they have in column, common. Map, and this one is going to be map ID name from the GC state, and the other one's going to be b dot state name. So same as we had up here. And cool. So yeah, just let's look at this one and just remember that our left join is going to return only the rows that have matching values, have matching rows from the right table. So we got our 69 rows, 90 columns, 69 rows. And if we were to look at SAS help, remember our left table, our left table is GC state, so I'm bouncing back and forth between a few things. That's our output data tab. And we have 69 rows on our left join and 90 columns. And if we were to look at GC state, let's see, we have the 69 rows. And in terms of the columns here, so we took, a substantial amount of columns because we only had 8 in GC state from the other data set, which was called US data. So in US data, there's a lot of information. That's like census data for every 10 years, basically. The population density, is the first one, and then there's like the rank of the population, the representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives. There's a lot of information here, and here population is probably a useful one throughout time. So lots of extra columns, but you only get one for each state occurrence. Also, the other thing, there's in GC state dataset, there's Canadian states, which return missing values for from the second dataset, which the US dataset. So the Canadian provinces don't have values; they have missing values. But we're doing a left join, so we're taking everything that's on. Like we said, we're left join. We're returning all the rows from the left table, which was GC state, and it had these Canadian provinces in. But US data, on the right side of our Venn diagram, has doesn't have a value for these, but we still preserve that row. But it just has missing values for the columns we're taking from the US data set that again doesn't have the Canadian provinces. And there's some other examples, but British Columbia is the first one, or Alberta is another example. Again, you won't have that because it's a Canadian province, not a US state. And there may be some other good examples. Perhaps Guam as a US territory is not in the US state. Yeah, again, it's missing value. Missing values. It doesn't have a state name. Okay. So that's a good example of a left join. And next we're going to be moving on to right joins. And now we're going to be moving on to right join, and similar concept to the left join. We're going to exclude everything from the left table that isn't a part of the right table. So here again, visually, you can see us. So if we look at set A and set B, we're taking the intersection of set A and set B, but we're not taking things that are exclusively of set A. So let's take a look at that in SAS Studio. So for our right join example, let's go ahead and actually just copy what we did with the left join and look at what the difference is between these two. And literally all we're going to change here is to just say, hey, we'll create table, we'll call it join 4, so it's a different name, so we could look at the, if you run this, you could go ahead and close out my pane here. So I'll just shrink this. So you could look in the work library, and I'm going to make another one called join 4, and you can look at the difference between the two of them there. So let's do right join here for the other one, and everything else is the same. So, okay, again, notice the difference in the rows. We're doing a right join here. So again, we're taking everything we have in the right table this time, which was the US data. So a right join, essentially returns all the rows from the right table and the matching rows from the left table. So notice here we're missing Alberta from the left table because we don't want it. We're this way, we're doing a right join. And so, yeah, so it's just basically 52 rows. And you're thinking there's a couple of U.S. territories in here, which gives us 52 instead, like Puerto Rico. They're in the left, the right table where we're talking about U.S. data. Think of, again, visualize our Venn diagram. We're taking everything from the right, and compare and contrast that with, what we had before with the, with the left join. So yeah, that's about it for left and right joins. Again, if you want to look at the differences further, recommend just, once you run it yourself, look at the difference between join 3 and join 4 to see the difference between these two. Okay, next we're going to move on to full joins. We're going to finish off with our last examples, which will be from the full join. And here we can see the Venn diagram. And a full join is, of course, everything from both tables and the intersection of those two tables. Let's go ahead and take a look at that in SAS Studio. So now, full join returns all rows from both of the tables, right? So we've seen that in our Venn diagram, and that includes any non-matching rows, right? So full join example. Okay. So now we could take this example again, what we use for the left and the right join, and look at it one more time with a full join. And I'll call this 5. And you notice it's exactly the same, essentially, almost exactly the same as what we had for our left join here. So in join 3 and join 5, you'd have the same. Because the left table had a lot more, had more rows, and it had all of the same rows the right join table had. The right table had, right? In a full join, we don't really care so much. We're taking everything, but you'll notice it's exactly the same as the full join, as the left join example was. The result is the same because sort of everything that was in the right table is also in the left table in terms of what we've joined on. So for every state name, they are in the left table. So again, in this example, the full join is exactly the same. One other example I want to show with a full join, since we talked about that one, is to think about using something called the coalesce function. That can be quite useful in a full join. And so bear with me on this example. We'll look at a data set we haven't looked at before, and actually, no, let's use the same two data sets, but let's show the usefulness of the coalesce function. And just we'll also do, I'll throw in another example about the coalesce function. Create table. We'll call this join 6. I'll just copy from here to save a bit of time. So join 6. And we're going to make a final column, or we could do this first. So it'll be the first row column we look at. So we use the coalesce function, and I'll just copy and paste these so I don't get them wrong since they've been working so far. So I use the coalesce function to take the as new state name. And we don't want the from statement because we need a comma because we're going to do everything from table A, table B, full join. So okay, so let's go ahead and run this. And so yeah, new state name will do this. It will give us this nice column where we'll take so we'll take the first occurrence from those two tables on this join. If I deselected all, so I got map ID name, and from the other table state name. So yeah, you notice with state name, we have these missing values, although map ID name would have kind of given us the same thing. But if you imagine that everything that was in the right table, when we were talking about left and right joins, wasn't in the left table, we'd also, this coalesce function would be taking the first valid column occurrence of either of these two, okay? But it just so happens because everything in the left table is in the, sorry, everything from the right table is in the left table in terms of the state names. That's always going to match what's in this column. So anyway, that's an example of using the coalesce function and how it can come in useful in a full join. An example outside of a join that might give you a better sense of the coalesce function. So it's just basically taking the first non-missing value of a list of variables, but it can become quite powerful. And again, we'll use this. This isn't a join. This is just a caveat of coalesce. Just an additional mention of the coalesce function. Additional example. Comment that out. Okay, and I'll just copy this, although I'm gonna, I'll just copy this just to save a bit of time typing. And we won't call this join at all because it's not a join. Coalesce example, or coalesce one. Let's call it that. Okay. Yeah. So coalesce example. I'll do the as select again. I'll take state name. And then I'm going to do, so I don't need any of these table names. So I just need a from statement option. from SAS-help.us data could, yeah, so that'll work for this example. I'm just showing you how the coalesce function, another example of how the coalesce function operates. And I want to get rid of the A table reference, reps 1910. Maybe I'll put this on another line just to make this a little bit cleaner. Yeah, 40. Well, you know what? I'll just skip 40. 50 and 60. So these are 5 different columns. I won't call them new state name because that doesn't make much sense. I'll call them just reps. Okay, so there's a bunch of columns in this data set called SAS-help.us data. And one of them is the number of representatives a state has. And these are the years from the US Census, 1910 through 1960. And I'm going to take the first, non-missing value from those columns. So if a state has data for 1910, it'll give me that. If it doesn't, it'll move on to 1920 and so on up to 1960. And so, yeah, so we'll notice here that we'll just look at the first 2 examples. Alabama have 10 and Alaska have 1. Again, we're using that coalesce function, and we're taking the first non-missing value. And if we actually go look at this data set in the SAS help library, it's called US data. And it's all the way towards the bottom. And sorry, I missed it. I forgot my alphabet. There it is, US data. Okay. So if we look at Alaska and Alabama, we have density information. So they're row 1 and 2. But now if we look at reps for Alabama, we got that 10, which comes from 1910. But for Alaska, we're missing, and then we get that 1 finally from 1960. So we're taking the first non-missing value out of that list of columns, and it becomes quite useful in joins, particularly full joins, when you have a series of columns like this where you want the first non-missing value, perhaps even from 2 different tables, maybe 3 different tables, that you would get this first occurrence. And so I just wanted to expand on that example we have with the full join to show you another one here, where we get the first non-missing value out of these list of different variables or columns. Cool. So that just about wraps up everything I wanted to talk about. So we went through the 4 simple types of joins. We went through an inner join where we returned only the rows that have matching values in both tables. We went for a left join where we returned all the rows from the left table and the matching rows from that right table. And then we did a right join, our third one, which returned all the rows from the right table that have matching rows from the left table. And then we finished off with the full join where we returned all rows from both tables, including any non-matching rows. And then, of course, we just finished off with the expansion on the coalesce function, how you might end up using it in a full join. Yeah, so that's essentially it. This video on the Pat Long Codes YouTube channel. All the code used in this tutorial can be found in the description below, so you can code along with the video as you go. Again, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.